The climate is fucking chilling. Like you open the newspapers and it's these 1930s ass headlines, and they've just scrubbed off the fucking serial numbers. They've replaced Jew with Arab, and it's fucking sent it to press. And hi, my name is HP Loveshaft. I'm a drag king and a student. As like a standard issue leftist, I've been aware of the Palestinian liberation cause for a couple of years now. It was something that I was sort of generally in support of, in the same way that, like, women's rights or, saving the planet or whatever. What radicalized me more recently was Germany's response following October 7th. I live in the predominantly Arab neighborhood in this city, and I am seeing just German police armed to the teeth, brutalizing teenagers and women standing by themselves, mourners lighting candles, and and it's only escalated. So while I don't consider myself a geopolitical expert in any stretch, obviously what's going on in Gaza is an atrocity. I also don't pretend to have answers or expertise on that. But I can see with my own eyes what's happening in my own neighborhood and in my own backyard, and that has, this is something that I think is very important to. It was shocking. It was very shocking. I had this naive idea about Germany that they had sort of, I come from the States where we've kind of paved over our history, and I was just like, what genocide? We've never done anything wrong in our lives. But in Germany, there's there's pieces of the wall, and there's these stumbling stones that they have, and shrapnel sticking out of the walls, and the history really stares you in the face. And I don't think that Germans are inherently better people or anything, but I did think that sort of because of geopolitical circumstance, they had been at least forced to reckon with their sins, and I really had a naive expectation of Germany when I came here, and to see the the 9/11 brain, the post 9/11 brain jump out on this continent in this decade was really shocking. I guess that's white privilege there, because a lot of the more racialized comrades I talk to are like, we hate to tell you, we hate to say I told you so, but we told you so. So yeah. I think most obviously, as a Jewish person, I have a role to play in tackling this framing that is being used by Germany right now. This we're fighting anti-Semitism. That's why we're demonizing all the brown people, and sending out the riot police, and it's to protect the Jews, you see. And so obviously, as a Jewish person, I have a role to play here, just to say no, thank you, don't like that, please. Obviously they're not listening to me, because it was never about me to begin with, but to reveal that hypocrisy, as I become a target of police brutality or media smear campaigns or things like that, all in service of protecting Jews. But that's more of an artifact of circumstance rather than an active choice that I'm making. As for the role that I'm sort of trying to take on, I come from the drag community, and someone told me a while ago, and I wish I remembered who it was, that a community isn't just a group of people that go to the same party every week. A community is people who suffer together. And I used to be a chef. I know how to give massages. I have a drag show. I tell jokes. I tell stories. I try to meet the spiritual needs of a community that is often alienated from traditional avenues of spirituality. Yeah. My Jewish community. My Jewish community I don't have one Jewish community. I grew up in the States, and a lot of the Jewish people that I met that were my age were very secular. Some of them had been on birthright, some of them hadn't, but most of them were at least critical of Israel, if not just full-on anti-Zionist, fucking, revolutionary, leftists. At the same time, my family is very Zionist, and I've spent, something like 35 years trying, maybe a little bit less than that. Radicalization was a process, and my own, de-Zionification, which is still an ongoing process. But I've tried to talk to my family about the disagreements that we have, shall we say, with regards to the state of Israel, and it's not been a fruitful conversation. It wasn't a fruitful conversation before October. I don't see it being a more fruitful conversation now. So I try to focus my energy within the movement, rather than fighting with people who are committed to not hearing me. Having said that, I've found a really amazing Jewish community of anti-Zionist Jews since then. I hate social media, but as an artist, I have to use it. And a couple of years ago, I started writing a newsletter. I was like, fuck this, fuck promoting my shit. And this newsletter, when October happened, the first week I didn't say anything. I reposted, I shared, and it took me about a week to compose my thoughts, and then what I had to say, I tried to stay in my lane. I tried to speak as a Jewish person, as a white passing person, as a person who, from the Soviet Union, as not to speak for the Arabs, not to speak for the world, just for myself and for my family, and and from a place of compassion, from a place of justice, but to sort of, as I said, stay in my lane. And something came tumbling out, but it was 3 weeks later that I met the Bundists, and it was it was how I started the newsletter. Was talking about the meeting with the Bundists, because I was just in a room full of Jews, and I counted kufiyas, and I just felt so much less alone than I had in the 3 weeks prior. Yeah, I mean, it's all white supremacy, isn't it? I mean, it's, not to sound reductionist, but that really is all it is. It's white supremacy. And this is why it drives me crazy that, when Germans try to make what happened here as a thing between Germans and Jews, because it wasn't. It was Germany cannibalizing itself in the name of white supremacy, right? And Germany's not unique to that. And Jews are not unique to that, and also these were German Jews to begin with. So but yeah, I mean, they're absolutely connected. I mentioned my own sort of deconversion from Zionism, shall we say, and it was and it's like I said, more for a couple of years now, I've been free Palestine, sure, but but yeah, like, when I started out, I came from my family, and I remember sitting in math class next to this girl who wore a hijab, and we were like, it was just, like, we were friends, like, it was not a big deal. My parents were really weird about it, and I just remember that being like, it's a 14-year-old girl from my math class, like, just the absurdity of it, like, and then the queer, like, the homophobia that I, faced upon coming out, like was, it was equally absurd. And now, as I, try to stand with my Palestinian neighbors, I, if you were in Gaza, they'd here's my incredibly violent fantasy of what I'd like to happen to you. And, like, thank you, you've convinced me. Like, when you put it like that. How could I have any doubt that you have my best interest at heart? At which point did we decide that the cops were the good guys? Right? Like, like I don't, like, the Zionist the Zionist, like, Antifa here, like, again, like, I'm not a geopolitical expert. I looked out of my window and I saw who the cops were beating up, and I said, okay, those are my people. And, like, how is that connected to my queerness? Well, I don't know, like, we just had a pride about it. Like, the cops have always been the enemy of the people. I don't understand how folks are acting brand new about this one. We don't have, is there a choice? I don't see myself as having a choice, but to be hopeful for the future. Like, I could, I could lay down in a corner and cry, but, like, ultimately, like, stand-up comedy is a deeply Jewish art form, right? This is, we have a long, proud history of laughing at our pain. So, yeah, like, we gotta, but like, specifically, concretely, what makes me hopeful, the Overton window is shifting. Like, John Oliver is talking about illegal West Bank settlements in those words exactly, right? Like, and that's something is happening, and the battle is far from won, and it's also far too late for many. So I don't mean to, like, make light, but we are doing something. This is not just, we're not just pissing into the wind here. Like, the push is happening, and something is happening, and the world is changing. That's undeniable. On a more immediate level, I know it sounds kind of cheesy, but my comrades, like, I don't know about you, but I grew up reading about, people fighting against impossible odds and putting their bodies on the line to do what's right and protect the people that they love. And now I'm friends with all those guys. I see them at the demo every weekend, and they're magnificent. They're the most beautiful people I've ever seen in my life. And yeah, that's, you asked earlier what motivates me, like, love, like, basic fucking love, like, the same thing that motivates all of us. Can I end with a joke? What do you call a protester who's been pepper sprayed? What? A seasoned activist.
Right, on that note. Beautiful.